Hello and welcome to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. My name is Ellie Waddington. I'm a hypnobirthing teacher, antenatal instructor and positive birth coach, and I'm here to help you go into the birth of your baby with a positive mindset. Every week I share my top tips, advice and amazing birth stories to help you go from fearful and anxious about your birth to positive and confident. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and let's get into this episode. Hey gorgeous mama, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am your host Ellie Waddington and I'm here helping you have an amazing birth experience. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad that you found us. We have a lot of fun here and I cannot wait to help you on your positive birth journey. If you are not new here, welcome back. I hope that you are well on your way to feeling more positive and confident and empowered for your upcoming birth. Welcome everybody. So this week I am joined by Candy from Nourishing Birth and Beyond, and we have an amazing conversation all about, well, everything really. I mean, the topic is supposed to be about breech birth, which we do talk about. We do talk a lot about breech birth and the issues surrounding it. And if you are in your third trimester currently and you've been told that your baby is breech and you're having to make some decisions, this is a great episode for you. But yeah, we go off on several tangents and we cover loads of different things, including birth partners and human rights and the birth room energy and loads of different things. This is a great episode. I've spoken to Candy a few times and I love talking to her. We get so in depth about lots and lots of stuff. So without further ado, here it is. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I am joined by Candy, who's going to talk to us all about breech births. Now, full disclosure, this is actually the second time that we're recording this conversation because the first time, Candy's half of the conversation didn't record. So we're taking that as a sign that there was obviously something that we didn't do properly last time with our conversation, and we are re-recording and hoping that we get everything we need to this time. So Candy, thank you so much for joining us again. Now, if you could please start by introducing yourself, tell us your story, kind of who you are, what you do, and, you know, how you got to doing what you do.
I'm a solo mum to 3 children. We're a neurodivergent family. My eldest is 11 now, which is staggering. I'm a nurse, so I've always had a deep passion for biology and physiology of the body and things. So being pregnant the first time, giving birth the first time, breastfeeding him for the first time, all just ignited this passion in me. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, would I be doing this now, I would have laughed. But I'm obsessed. Kind of obsessed. It's something I'm very passionate about birth, supporting with breastfeeding. I do tongue tie support as well. So all those kind of areas are very interlinked. I teach yoga, pregnancy yoga and hypnobirthing. I do one-on-one support for mindset support around birth. Yeah, bounce around doing lots of things, support with breastfeeding, tongue tie divisions, all that sort of thing. So kind of lots of different areas that I'm really passionate about and spend my time doing and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of being obsessed, and I don't know about you, but I find that even when I'm supposed to be like relaxing or spending family time, like a part of my brain is still thinking about this work. Like I'm still thinking about like a little article that I read earlier or an interesting fact, or one of my clients that I know is due soon. Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And because of the nature of my work, my in-person clients, I get them for their whole journey. So they come back and forth to me and it brings me back to information they told me when they were pregnant. Information in the news, like looking at the media, there's lots of stuff that is relevant for human rights and women's rights. And that's a really key element of birth and understanding your rights when you're giving birth, what choices you have, and making decisions. That links very much with breech birth.
Birth is an incredibly vulnerable time, and the way that you are treated makes a huge difference to how it unfolds, because you can have a really kind of, for want of a better word, a traumatic time, but if you've been treated with respect and you've had supportive people around you, that can still be a positive experience, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the same is true for the reverse. On paper you could have a really good birth, but actually if something in your experience was problematic in how you were treated, how you were spoken to, how you didn't feel heard anything like that, that can have then a big negative effect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting that you talk about kind of women's rights in that, because we know that throughout lots of, women's areas in the medical profession, there's less research being done on these things. There's less kind of effort being put into moving forward with these things, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's still a shortfall with all of this, and change is slowly happening, but actually there's lots of work still to do.
We are talking today about breech births, which is there's a whole massive topic around breech, and there are so many different things that we're going to talk about today. But first off, could you just tell us, what does breech actually mean?
When a baby is born, most of the time they come out vaginally, head down, and there are different positions baby can be in. There's a position that is the most straightforward for baby being born. That's with their head down, their back along the left side of your tummy, and their feet tucked up to the right side of the ribs. And that just means they have the least amount of moving to do to come down the birth canal. Babies can come out in any position. Breech is when babies are head up. So their head's up by your ribs, and either their bum is down and their legs are up by their ears, or their legs are all crunched in together, or one leg's up, one leg's down. Any sort of position where their head is up by your ribs is breech. So there's a lot of different varieties. Babies get into lots of different positions. Some babies, if they're born vaginally, breech will come out bum first with their legs all squashed into their body and up around their ears. Some babies will be born feet first. Literally feet are the first thing that is visual when they're being born. But all of those positions are classed as breech.
And I think kind of the immediate thing, the reason that it's really important to have these conversations, the immediate reaction whenever there's a slight deviation from what we call normal, people panic. They automatically think, oh dear, this is an emergency because it's not normal. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
Absolutely. So the thing with breech is you do need the people supporting you to understand how to support breech birth, because the support that's needed is very, very different to a head down birth. But actually the body does most of the work for you. So actually less is more. And actually with breech, it's more about hands off for most of the time, and just at the end helping baby clear their chin and their head, so that they're born without delay at that point. I mean, there are babies who are unexpectedly breech, who are just born, and it's when their bum comes out or their feet come out, they go, oh, okay, baby's breech. There's no emergency in that instance. Nothing changes. It's just about having the right people around to support. But it's a normal physiological way that babies can be born. That we have a very medicalized birth system. Induction rates are phenomenal, cesarean rates are phenomenal. The knee-jerk reaction generally when a baby has breech is we'll either try and change baby's position, or we will do a cesarean section. Often it isn't actually discussed at all that actually you can have a normal vaginal delivery, a normal vaginal birth, not delivery. Pizzas are delivered, babies are born, but not a normal birth when babies breech. And actually babies are really malleable. They're really designed for birth. They're designed to come out whatever. Women in comas, pregnant people in comas give birth without doing anything. The body does all the work, and it's for us to come out of the way and allow that to happen and support the body however the body needs supporting. The only instance a baby, if it's multiples, there's lots of factors with multiples. If baby is transverse, that would be unsafe to try and give birth naturally. So transverse is when baby is lying sideways, like horizontally across the tummy. And the problem with that is that no part of baby can easily come down the birth canal. So there's implications with the cord and waters and things like that. So there at this point in time, there isn't a safe way to support a transverse baby being born vaginally. But otherwise, any other position, bum down, head down, they can come out. The babies come out with their heads at funny angles. Babies come out with hands tucked next to their heads. And that's the body is designed to do that. The vagina is designed to make space, and the birth canal to make space for baby to come down. And that, sometimes birth takes longer for these different reasons, but that's not a problem. That's normal physiology.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, we kind of have to remember that if baby is breech, there's a reason for that. Like sometimes there is a reason that baby has chosen to be that way up, isn't that right?
Absolutely. There have been like cases where mums have like tried to do, there's a website called Spinning Babies. So that can be a really great website to look at. It's the last time I looked at it, it was a bit old-fashioned looking, but actually the content is amazing. So if you can kind of look past the aesthetics, the content is really helpful. Has lots of different things you can use. There's lots of movements, like I would teach my yoga class. There's lots of things you can do to help encourage baby into a head down position. There are mums who perhaps do all that, get baby into head down position, but then they go back breech, and actually after their baby's born, they can see what's happening either with their baby's cord or something with the placenta, or something gives them the information postnatally to like, oh, of course, like there was absolutely no way you could have safely been born head down because of such and such and such and such. Babies they play a part in their birth. You can do all the hypnobirth thing, you can do all the mindset prep, you can do all the yoga practice, have everything beautifully set up in all the most optimal ways, and there's still that factor of your baby chooses different aspects of their birth, their anatomy, your anatomy, something they need that we don't know about perhaps, or just the fact that they just kept sucking their thumb in utero and that's why it was up by their head. There's no way to control birth, and there is always that element of other aspects that we don't know about. We might never know sometimes as well. But yeah, you can't do everything perfect and everything be perfect. It doesn't work like that. But equally, doing nothing isn't going to set you up for a good birth. There are lots of things you can do to facilitate birth. So it's a case of working out what's right for you, and actually as well spending time reading about vaginal breech birth, how safe that is, the history of why cesareans have been offered and why we have gone down that route, really learning about it so you feel empowered with your decisions, because that's the biggest thing is eliminating your own fear and anxiety around something so that you feel completely comfortable and have faith in your body and in yourself.
Yeah, so can we just talk a little bit more about that? So you mentioned there about the history of breech and why we moved more towards doing cesareans for breech babies. Why is that? So what is the potential risk, the potential danger if a baby is born breech vaginally?
Birth is best supported unobserved. So like yourself, you look after wild cattle, like animals, people can more relate to things like cats giving birth under a bed. They take themselves off to that safe, dark space under the bed and don't want to be disturbed until their kittens are born. And I mean, I had no idea about cows. It makes 100% sense, but I've never known of wild cows until speaking to you. And and it's like, of course, like all animals, we as a society watch lambs being born and go and see lambing, but actually they're not being born in the most natural way, because they wouldn't be born in front of lots of people like that and surrounded by lots of other sheep annoying them. Like it's natural for us to hibernate, if you like, when we give birth. With breech, the only thing is what can happen is baby's body can be born and their head can take some time to come out. Their chin can get just a little bit, it's a bit tricky to get a chin out of that space without a little bit of support sometimes. And the problem is the placenta can detach, but we wouldn't know that. And if the placenta is detached and is on top of baby's head because it's ready to also be born, babies then not getting the oxygen from the placenta. So when a baby is being born head down, we can safely assume that baby is getting the oxygen they need because their head is out. And if the placenta did come away, their body would be born quite quickly because there's no, their body comes out much quicker than their head. So actually there's no concern over that. Whereas if a baby is sat with their body and neck exposed, but their head hasn't come out yet, we do need to support baby's head coming out reasonably quickly if it doesn't come out straight away, just in case the placenta has come away already. So with supportive breech birth, the biggest problems are the two extremes. So one extreme is it being really overly medically managed and people interfering and wanting to do lots of things the whole time to like help baby come out. The problem with that is actually the body knows how to birth your baby and it will do all the adjustments that are actually needed. And if baby has one leg tucked up and one leg tucked down, that's for a reason. And actually, even if we don't understand that reason, it's not for us to try and get the other leg down, you know, it's not for us to kind of do those things because actually the body's already working out what it needs to do. So too much intervention can make it difficult for a breech baby to come out because then they get in a more difficult position potentially, all those sorts of problems. And then full hands off would be then waiting and letting baby come out fully on their own and not supporting with their head being born. And if the placenta had detached, nobody would know. And that's problematic because then baby's not getting oxygen. So it's those two extremes are problematic. Saying all of that though, there's breech training out there, you know, health professionals have breech training, and actually having good breech training just means minimal intervention at the end, perhaps a little bit of support to just help baby's head come out, and that's it. So it's about having knowledgeable health professionals. In terms of why we've gone to cesarean section is because we weren't teaching about breech birth enough. We have medicalized birth so much that we've kind of lost sight of the natural physiology and the body's ability to do this. If you look at our medical model, it's all about controlling birth. Inductions happen because of timeframes and babies apparently not coming out soon enough, you know, and that's crazy because nobody's ever saying to a cat or a cow or a sheep, you know, oh, we need to do something now because your baby hasn't been born yet, and they should have. If you think about sheep getting, I don't know enough about animals that are domesticated, but you know, sheep presumably actually they're all fertilized and inseminated, if you like, by a ram, probably all on the same day or the same couple of days, right? Like they're in heat and that's kind of how it works. But they're really spaced out when the lambs are born, right? And we're mammals, so it's designed like that. And actually, we know that taller women carry their babies for longer. So that's a factor. There's lots of other factors. There's ethnicity, there's what your family's history is like. There's so many factors. And we are constantly trying to control that by inducing babies and saying, no, they should be born at this time. And it's the same with cesarean and breech. It's like, you know, if there could be some risk, and actually we'll just negate that by having a cesarean. But actually, it's asking for health professionals who have the right training. And private midwives are great. They work in the community, like that's where they work. They'll see you in your home and support you throughout your pregnancy and come to your birth. They have probably the most exposure to vaginal breech birth, either like unknown vaginal breech birth or planned vaginal breech birth, because that's their sort of exposure with home birth. And home birth midwives often as well have that training. And also we know that having babies at home is that optimal position. That's that situation, that environment. It's that hibernating sort of environment, closing off the world, very safe. How your birth hormones need the environment to be to grow and to build. And that is the optimum environment for any sort of birth, and particularly breech. So it's having those professionals who are able to support you adequately, chatting to them, making sure they understand and have the right training, and talking to them about different scenarios and what about this and what about that, and asking them all of your questions, because that's what they're here for, to explain everything to you so you feel confident and safe. And you know, I had a client who had a breech baby and was seeing the obstetrician, and the obstetrician was really supportive of her having a vaginal breech birth. They understood that they had done their research and that was something they strongly wanted to do. You know, they were fully supportive with that. So it's it's about voicing what you need. And actually, in terms of any kind of birth, it's saying to a health professional, this is what I need, this is what I want. How can you support me with this? Rather than being told, no, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. It's like, actually, no, this is what I need. How can we do that?
As well as the training to do with breech birth, also the confidence, because obviously we know that all midwives go through this training, but then so few of them actually then regularly see breech vaginal births, and they kind of, is it fair to say they kind of lose their confidence to be able to deal with it over the course of time because they're just not dealing with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And because we opt for cesarean birth as the default with breech, there is less exposure to breech birth, absolutely. And that's why when you're finding out information, is finding out have you supported breech birth, what's your experience of breech birth, all of those bits of information. There's loads of courses that health professionals can do. If you had like a private midwife that you really got on with and they wanted to support you, they might say, okay, I'm happy, but actually I would like to bring in this colleague because they have much more breech experience than I do. But they should just be able to tell you what they're comfortable with. And there will always be someone who's enthusiastic as well. If you say we're planning to give birth in a hospital and it's a hospital that hasn't experienced vaginal breech birth like hardly at all and none planned, it would be asking the nurse in charge, the midwife in charge, asking like, is there a core group of midwives who are passionate about vaginal breech birth, who would be willing to support us, who are willing to do that up-to-date training so that they are confident? And there will be, because midwives got into midwifery to support babies being born in the most natural way. There are some that just it's not something they're able to do for you, and they'll clearly tell you. But there will always be midwives who are incredibly passionate. And also doulas are a really great support, and particularly if you are having your baby vaginally breech, they're that additional support to support you with position changes, using a rebozo, doing hip squeezes, different positioning to help with that. And again, they are likely to have seen more breech births often than someone perhaps working in the hospital. So having a team of people who you trust and feel supported by and have the enthusiasm as well as the knowledge and experience to support you.
Because the energy that your team give off, it will have a huge effect on you and your mindset. If you have someone who's calmly in the corner just watching you very confidently, that's a very different energy to someone who's very reluctantly supporting a breech birth and is constantly watching the clock, wants to constantly do vaginal examinations. That's very different energy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to have confidence in yourself if you're aware you're going against someone else's feelings and energy, and actually birth is very much, it's very much a woman's energy. There's a male midwife called Mark Harris, and he's fantastic. He's got a great book, he's been on some podcasts and things, and there's something like 256 male midwives or something in the UK when he wrote his book. And he said, you probably think I'm going to say we need more male midwives, and he's like, but I'm absolutely not. It is a very feminine energy. If a woman was in labor and a man walked in who didn't know her, he wouldn't instinctively support her in the right way, whereas a woman would. Even if you've never seen a baby being born, you would instinctively know to go and support and offer hands-on support. It's a real innate urge to do that, and it's having that sort of energy, that sort of faith, because the body we do give birth. You couldn't keep a baby in, like it doesn't happen. No matter what you do, the baby will be born. And also having people who, like you say, that they have a knowing. There's hoping for things and there's knowing, and you want someone who has a knowing that it will all be okay, and we'll do all the things if anything's needed, but it will all be okay. And that's very different than anxiously hoping. And it's calming and grounding, and energy is contagious. If you walk into a room and people have had an argument, you can walk in and feel that energy. In the same way, if you walk into a room and everything's serene, you just melt into that serenity, that peace and that calm. And that's what everyone who's supporting in birth needs to bring with them.
Furthering on your point about kind of men in the birth room, my husband is very much, he needs to be doing something. So I remember during my home birth, anytime he was just sat there, like just kind of next to me, he was very anxious. He didn't like that. But when he was up, like filling the birth pool, stoking the fire, doing things, he was so much more calm. And that was a much nicer energy to have. And you're right about men and women having very different energies in the birth rooms. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and I think it's knowing that as well, because in in some heterosexual relationships, it might be that the male partner just knows they're not the right person to support you in birth. And it might be, yeah, you're having a home birth and actually they just spend their time out in a specific room because they want to be nearby, but actually they just need to be out of the way. And you might have your sister, your best friend, your mum, your auntie, your cousin, someone else there taking that primary role, might have your doula as well. And they're making up a team, and that then your partner can still know they're available if they're needed, but actually everybody be okay with knowing they're not the right person. And likewise, if you're giving birth in hospital and your partner can't stand hospitals, that's not what you need. You don't need that energy. And it's much to feel guilty by not being there is if you know it's not the right place, it's much better to actually just step back. Like you shouldn't feel like you have to be there, because actually if you're going to cause more harm than good, it's a much better choice to just actively say, this is how I can support you. And actually sometimes supporting you is stepping back and bringing other people in to support you.
Yeah, and in the same kind of wavelength, the woman who's giving birth also shouldn't feel guilty about saying, I don't think you are the right person to support me either. So I think there is a little bit of guilt in that they feel like that person has to be there because it's their child or what have you. But if you feel like that person is not going to be the right person to support you, it's okay to ask them to step back or to have additional people. I mean, I kind of tongue in cheekly always say that you are better off having no birth partner at all than a bad birth partner. And I'm kind of joking, but also half very serious. Like a bad birth partner who's in that room with you will cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, birth is a team effort and we need support, but yeah, the wrong support actually is a hindrance. And although someone laboring fully on their own would be very exhausting and challenging, it's completely doable, whereas someone who is constantly causing you anxiety and stress, that doesn't allow your birth hormones to build at all. So it's 100% right, isn't it? Equally, it's the same with health professionals. If the only way to have a consistent health professional that you see throughout your pregnancy and your birth would be a private midwife. The next best thing is home birth midwives. A hospital, it's much more that it's very, whoever is there. But saying that if there's something that just doesn't gel right with the midwife or the obstetrician, if you have an obstetrician, ask for someone else, because again, it can be something huge that's problematic, or it can be something really little. A friend, the midwife kept commenting on her having a high BMI, but kept on talking about this throughout when she was in labor, and it was inappropriate. Nothing she was saying was relevant, and actually she just needed to be quiet anyway, and wasn't. And you just gotta get your birth team to just whisper to them, like, I need a different midwife or I need a different obstetrician. And their role is to advocate. The role of the birth partner is to protect the space, and protecting the space is with the people in the space. So if someone's talking, asking them not to, or asking them to go into a different room to talk, whatever you need. But having someone that you're constantly in your head going, oh God, I can't do that. That's just you don't want to be in your head in birth. You just want to be in your hormones and your body. And if there's this little niggling about an individual in the room, that individual needs to not be in the room. And as a health professional, I would always want someone to say if I was the wrong fit. If they didn't feel comfortable with me for some reason, if it's someone who, I don't know, I went to school with, if it's It could be anything. It could be anything. Just something about my behavior reminds them of someone, or something I've said and it's been misunderstood, but it makes them uncomfortable, or anything at all. I would much prefer them to say, actually, please, can I have someone else? The last thing I would want is someone to go away feeling very stressed about their experience because I wasn't the right person for them. And it's the same for midwives. So there are the occasional people who their ego will get in the way and they're a bit put out by that. It doesn't matter. That's their issue. That's not your issue. Your issue is having people who make you feel calm and relaxed and safe during your birth.
Yeah, and that's kind of just another way that this kind of people pleasing thing that we all have as women gets in the way of our birth is, we can have a member of staff that we really don't want to be there. They're not the right fit for us, but we're too scared of offending them or causing trouble. It might be a bit of a faff trying to find a different midwife, and we're just so concerned with other people's comfort that jeopardizes our own experience. So yeah, so to anyone listening, it's okay to ask for alternative staff if they're not the right fit for you. It's absolutely okay. So one thing I do want to talk about, you mentioned earlier on, is potentially turning babies when they are when you're pregnant. Is it an ECV? Is that what it's called? Yeah. So could you talk to us a little bit about that and what that involves?
Yeah, so as you come into your third trimester, if baby hasn't become head down, generally around 36 weeks, they'll be starting to think about an ECV procedure. So it involves an obstetrician laying their hands on you and trying to encourage baby to turn head down. So manually doing it from your abdomen from the outside with some gel. It's successful 50% of the time. And of the 50% of the time where it works, some of those babies will still return to a breech position. It can be very painful and it does come with risks. It needs to be done in the hospital because if during the procedure, because it's done, they use an ultrasound to some degree, but actually it's done blind. We're not seeing what's happening internally because there's no way to do that. So there are risks with it. If you're wanting to have a try with that, just read about it, understand the risks so that you really understand the risks, because often in maternity interventions, the risks aren't clearly made, they're not made clear and they're not talked about in detail. It's more like, this is what we want you to do, so we're going to kind of just talk about the positives of that. And that's not true consent. True consent is understanding all the benefits, all of the risks, the whole picture, so you can make a balanced view. And for whatever reason in our maternity culture, that just doesn't happen. So things like this do take that time. Research other people's experiences, because again, someone who's had the same procedure can talk to you of their experience, what was good, what was bad, all of those things. So you can really get an honest view. Starting some medical intervention often leads to other medical intervention. So that's something to know as well. And it's just understanding the full picture. It's like induction. We talk about induction almost as easily as we talk about blood pressure. Like, oh, shall we do a sweep? As if it's like, shall we do your blood pressure? And we don't talk about the whole picture. And actually, it can have a big impact on birth. So having that full understanding induction can take a week of being in and out, stop and start labor, because that's how long it can take. Understanding the full picture to make the full decision, and knowing that you won't get the full picture without doing some research. But yeah, so people, instead of ECV, they can opt to have a vaginal breech birth. They can try spinning babies to just do different movements and positions to get their baby into the right position. They can just wait and see if their baby turns. Of course, you can have an elective cesarean section, and none of this is to say don't have an elective cesarean. We just know there are lots of benefits of babies being born vaginally. So with those benefits in mind, that's why considering a vaginal breech birth might be for lots of individuals. But yeah, there's no requirement to try an ECV at all. It's a very personal choice.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Like I say, whenever I'm discussing these things with any of my clients, anyone that I talk to, is that I am not trying to persuade you or dissuade you either way. I'm just trying to draw your attention to the options and to let you know that this C-section or the ECB or whatever, that's not the only way, and you do have choices. And the way to have a truly empowered birth experience is to know all your options and make a decision that's right for you.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I say similar as well to my clients. It's from health professionals in the maternity system, people will only be exposed to this very medicalized model way of doing things. And that is all that will be spoken about unless questions are asked. And so when I teach very heavily about all the other options. Because if they want to hear the medicalized stuff, I mean, I cover medicalized stuff, but if they really want to hear all the ins and outs of the medicalized stuff, go to those health professionals who are working off that model. Whereas actually, it's our job as hypnobirthing teachers to really normalize all the things that we, for some reason, aren't normalizing in this day and age.
What I specifically try and talk to people about as well is intuition, is your gut and your what your gut is telling you about this situation. Because I think so many women, they almost like they don't trust their gut. They think, oh, if this other person is telling me that thing, then that must be right, and my gut isn't right. And I think that's really sad that someone would rather trust a stranger who, yes, healthcare professionals, they are experts in the human body, but you're an expert in your body. No one else can tell you what you're feeling and what's going on with your body. That no one else can tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a social media post this week, and it was someone saying the ideal time to learn about birth is before you're pregnant. And I was like, yes, because that's a big, you're vulnerable in pregnancy, that struggling to tune into your gut feeling because you have anxiety, it's much harder to identify what's a gut feeling, what's anxiety, and if someone's telling me this is the best thing, they must know. And it's very drip fed into us our whole lives, like doctor knows best, doctor knows best, doctor knows best. And in illness, absolutely. But when you're pregnant, when you're giving birth, you're not ill. You're not a patient. You're a birthing human being. And although through all their training, we know the to have physiological natural birth where the hormones build as they should, it's no intervention. Home birth is just as safe, like statistically, just as safe as hospital birth. And now where we have become so induction heavy and since the pandemic, very cesarean heavy, actually many individuals would say home birth is safer than hospital birth because the chance of intervention is so incredibly high in a hospital setting.
Yeah, and the kind of example that I give to a lot of my clients is if I invite a plumber into my house to look at a leak or something like that, it's not because I'm handing control of my household utilities over to that plumber. I'm just asking his advice. Like, and if I think it's good advice and that's right for me, then I might hire him to do the work. And the same applies to healthcare professionals, in my opinion. Like, I'm asking that healthcare professional what their opinion is, what they would suggest in this situation. I'm not handing my bodily autonomy over to that healthcare professional.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing, isn't it? Is keeping your autonomy. And there does it get called patient syndrome, something like patient syndrome. And as soon as you put a patient in, like I'm talking a sick patient in this instance, put a patient on a hospital stretcher or bed in a hospital gown, they immediately become, yes, I'll do whatever you say. You're in a position of authority, of power. I'm very vulnerable. Whatever you say is the right thing to say. And unfortunately, because it is a power and difference in a hospital, and there is as well, with any health professional, because they are coming to you with a place of knowledge and authority and things like that, and there isn't this even balance, but actually individuals taking that autonomy and keeping hold of it and saying, no, this is the birth I want, and this is what I am doing. How can you support me with that? Take back that power. And it's not a straightforward thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. And many individuals in pregnancy aren't able to do that. So that again is perfect, where a doula is a really great person, because they know the full scope and the full implications of everything through experience and knowledge that you can never possibly know. So they can really look big picture and help give you helpful information and balancing information and advocate for you, because it's not possible if you haven't, you know, if historically we all used to live in villages together, we saw babies being born from the moment we opened our eyes on this planet. We saw babies breastfeeding, you know, we understood how it looked, how it went, whereas now we don't have that knowledge. And it's like, I describe it like, if when you learn to drive a car, if you learn to drive a car, you already have 50% of the knowledge how to drive a car. If you've been in a car regularly, you understand what a roundabout is, you understand what a road is, you understand the way of driving, the rules of driving. If you came from outer space and had never seen a car before, you wouldn't even know what it was. And that's how we approach birth at the moment. We don't even know what it is. We like can intellectually understand, but that's it. And because we've had no exposure, it's an alien concept.
Yeah, that's a really good, that's a really, really good analogy, actually. I really like that. And I'm going to use that, actually. I really like that. But I just want to further on your point about doulas as well. And somewhere where doulas really come into their own is with local knowledge as well, because I speak to a lot of people online. Lots of my clients are online. Whereas we know that it's a massive lottery throughout the UK and throughout the world what your local trust recommends and your local healthcare professionals. You know, I can recommend, you know, my local trust, but a doula will have local knowledge about, you know, what their local trust recommends and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's really common for people to spend £1,000 on a buggy system or a cot and nursery setup, but actually spend that £2,000 on a doula, 1,000, 2,000, whatever, you know, your doula's pricing. Spend that money on a doula to get the birth that you're looking for, because that will shape your entire parenting journey. Everything else is so much less important than having a positive experience where you can hold your baby in your arms, beaming, empowered, wowed by what your body's capable of, and then having a smoother first few months, you know, having a negative experience stays with you. And, you know, birth is unpredictable. Sometimes things happen that no matter what you've done, it could happen. But having that support system with you allows you to have as much control as you can, make decisions, make choices. So you have a much more positive experience through the other side because of those aspects.
Yeah, and I think there is this real tendency to think of birth as being just one day. You know, I don't want to spend money on a hypnobirthing course or a doula or a private midwife. It's just one day. I'm going to get it done and dusted. But birth, as far as I'm concerned, it can last 2 years. Birth starts from conception. It then goes all the way through pregnancy. You have birth and you have postpartum. And we know that your birth journey will have a direct effect on bonding with baby, on breastfeeding, on your relationship with your partner, on your decision to have another baby. Like, it's not just one day. It's, you know, it lasts the rest of your life potentially.
A friend I was speaking to recently, because I'd done a social media post on saying, you know, saying birth should not be traumatic. We need to address this and change this. There's been more recent inquiries and things into traumatic birth and stuff. We're still a long way from rectifying that. But my friend who I spoke to, it was also a friend that I don't speak to regularly, but actually she saw it, she reached out, we were doing voice notes back and forth, and she was sobbing, and her from her birth, from her 20-year-old, she was sobbing and had never pieced it together. And we were just chatting it through, and the effect it then had on her second child, and actually affected, because she had postnatal depression, it then affected her relationship with her second child, because she just was still processing her experience and still sobbing about it 20 years later. But actually, we've been able to really chat it out, and actually getting that out, processing it has been really beneficial. And actually it's helped her relationship with that second child, because she's realized actually that is the reason things have always been a bit different between her second and her first and third child, and it's had that lasting impact. And we're not saying these things to scare anyone. It's just essential. It's essential. You don't know what you don't know. So it's really important to understand all of the information to put yourself in the best position. And with such high medical intervention in this day and age, it does come with that negative experience often, particularly if you don't know. An induction from start to baby being born will take a week. Lots of people don't understand that, and the implications of these health professionals do these things day in, day out. So they don't even realize this tiny little piece of this thing has a big impact. There's loads of situations where things you just didn't expect or you didn't quite understand, and then it changes it. So understand it can feel scary to look into all of these things. It can feel like you just want to put your head in the sand and just trust that it will be sorting itself out. But actually, just knowing can help massively. I have a friend in Spain who did some like virtual pregnancy yoga with me through her pregnancy, messaged me when her waters had broken and all sorts of things. But we'd never talked about birth because the distance, and it was never something she sought out from me. But she didn't want to have a cesarean birth, so she didn't learn about cesarean birth. And then she ended up having a cesarean birth, and she was really struggled because she just hadn't learnt about it. It wasn't something that came up, and as much as I'm sure that you're the same, we want to give all the options, all the natural options, there's an array of tools you can use. There's so many things you can use for birth to have this positive birth experience. But it's also really essential to understand all the possible medical interventions that you might be offered, so because you can't say yes to something or no to something without understanding the details. There is always the option of, instead of being induced, having a cesarean section. Like if the elements of induction are not something that you're comfortable with, saying no, like I either have my baby naturally of its own accord, or I'm going to have a cesarean section. That is your right to choose that always. And it's so, yeah. And also impatience, right? Everyone gets impatient. The last few weeks of pregnancy are the longest weeks ever. And actually this idea of, okay, well, we'll induce you, makes you think, oh, my baby will be here sooner. But it's not like pressing a button and here's your baby.
And I think I was one of those women that was guilty. With my first pregnancy, I stuck my head in the sand and I didn't do any preparation. And I thought, do you know what? Women have been giving birth for thousands of years. It'll be fine. But of course, you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't take into account, we haven't been giving birth in hospitals for thousands of years. We haven't been giving birth in the medical setting for thousands of years. And everything that happened with my first birth, I'm 99% sure happened because of the intervention and because of the setting. And I'm really glad that I learned differently for my second birth. And you're absolutely right in what you're saying earlier about how we used to have this knowledge from everyone around us. We used to have this birth knowledge from our aunties and our mums and people that were having babies around us. And as birth has moved more into the medical setting and we're so separated from it, we just don't have that knowledge anymore. And it's down to us to educate ourselves. We have to take on this responsibility to educate ourselves, sad as it is, and that's an extra level of anxiety really to put on a pregnant person to start getting educated. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the Scandinavian countries, I'm getting it mixed up in my head. It's either Finland or Holland have the highest home birth rates in the world. And it's their normal is you give birth at home unless there is a medical reason why you would need to have hospital support. And that is, that goes from a baby with a congenital heart condition, a baby with a cleft lip, a baby with some sort of concerns that they need that support, or a mother who has preeclampsia, a mother who has epilepsy and their medication has needed to be changed in pregnancy. Those high risk genuine medicalized reasons for giving birth in a hospital setting, whereas actually normalizing home birth, seeing that as the primary choice, the optimal choice. But because we're not there, it leaves people doubting. The implication is we would do that if it was safe, but because we don't do that, it's not safe. And actually, that is not the case at all. It's we do this because we've done this for a very long time, and this is all we know, and that's it. Like, that's it. That's where the story ends. And it's the same when people are sick in the hospital. Not everything is perfectly based on research. It's I've always done this. I know does this and this and this, but it isn't black and white like that. The induction rates have skyrocketed in the last 50 years. The stillborn rates have not changed. And we say that we're inducing to prevent stillborn babies, but it doesn't marry up with the data.
No, and this is what so many people don't appreciate, is that there are so many medical interventions in birth right now, not because birth is dangerous and things are going wrong and there are emergencies happening, but when you look at it, we're doing these interventions to stop something happening that has less than a 1% chance of potentially happening. You're, doing something massive to the body, which in itself carries risks, and does harm, to potentially prevent something that has less than a % chance of happening, which is nuts. That's absolutely crazy.
It is crazy. And the thing is, with medical intervention, that risk of less than 1% again jumps up because we are intervening. And, a vaginal examination, it was never designed to look at progress of labor. It was only in instances of baby being in a difficult position, and only if it was needed because of that. It was never designed to be routine. There is actually no correlation with cervix dilation and how long it will take for your baby to be born. That's the model we use, but you can be 1 centimeter dilated and give birth 10 minutes later, and you can be 10 centimeters dilated and give birth 6 hours later. There's no correlation at all. Nobody can tell you. Also, we don't know if the act of putting your hand in someone's vagina changes what the cervix is doing. And in high likelihood, it does, because it's a very intimate thing. It has a huge knock-on effect. So having a sweep, having a sweep is induction. Having those interventions has an impact on your hormones, on your birth, even from before you're in labor, and
not to mention sort of potentially introducing infection or accidentally rupturing the membranes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's important to understand, because what does it mean if they accidentally break your waters by doing a sweep, rupturing the membranes? What does that mean? And what are the implications? Often babies are, for different instances, being induced at 39 weeks. There are plenty of babies who would naturally be born at 43 weeks. So that's 4 weeks early, potentially. 4 weeks early. Babies are born when their lungs are ready to be born. Babies are born when their suck reflex is ready to feed. And taking those weeks away from them has an impact on that.
I'm trying to think sort of what my next question was. We got off on a bit of a tangent there, but I'm loving this conversation. So we've been talking for over an hour now, which I've really enjoyed. Is there anything that we should be talking about with regards to breech births that we haven't already covered, do you think?
I think just approach it with curiosity. And I think that goes for any aspect of birth. Approach it with curiosity. Don't come into any situation with expectation and preconceived ideas. Be curious, let your curiosity lead you. If there are things that you're like, oh, what does that mean? I want to know more about that. Find out a bit more about that. Oh, I don't know about that. Find out about that. Just be curious, because it's like parenting as well. Geez, like the way I thought babies would feed, be changed, and sleep. Wow, that was a shock. I have 3 children, and none of my children were sleepers. We have these ideas because what we've seen on telly, what we've seen on films, what we've been exposed to. Often people want to tell you negative stories about birth. It's not so often that actually people want to talk about their positive birth experience, sadly. Just be curious. It's your own body, it's your own birth, it's your own baby, and you absolutely get to steer the ship.
Yeah, and if this is something that you are curious about, go and seek out those positive breech stories. That there's loads of them on YouTube. There are loads of natural breech births on YouTube. Go and seek them out and see what you think.
Yeah, and find out why would someone want to have their baby vaginally breech, because again, lots of people listening probably are like, oh yeah, but why on earth would I do that if that's not what I'm being offered, and actually do. Yeah, it's about information, and actually reading positive birth stories is phenomenal because it's that little oxytocin boost which you need throughout pregnancy. It's that moment of connecting with your body, connecting with your baby, and letting your mind wonder about your birth and meeting your baby and holding them in your arms for the first time. And it's beautiful. So let birth be exciting, because it really, really is exciting. And learning, spend some time learning about the risks and those elements perhaps you don't really want to know about, but you need to know about. And then just get to a point, draw a line under all of that. You don't need to focus on that anymore. Fill yourself up with all the positive birth stories, the podcasts, all that positive information, because that's what you need to be surrounded in those final weeks to have that confidence and faith in yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Candy. Can we just finish off by, if someone would love to work with you, do some of your services, how would they do that? How would they go about working with you?
Yeah, so my website is nourishingbirthandbeyond.co.uk. Everything's on there. I offer in-person and online support. I offer mindset support at different packages. So getting you in the right mindset for birth, for all of those aspects, as well as digital and online courses. It's all there. There's blog posts, different things there. So if that's of any interest, just go and check that out. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really love this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Fabulous. Thank you.